A makeshift parade ground in the heart of the Luwero Triangle. The Ugandan government dismisses these rebels as bandits. They see themselves as national saviours. 4 years ago, this man, Yoweri Museveni, led 27 disaffected soldiers into the bush. Today, his national resistance army numbers an estimated 6,000. The Ugandan army's fighting methods against his rebellion have brought it into the centre of a human rights controversy. And the rebels are convinced that their fight is a just one.
What else can we do if you have got a government which has closed off all other channels of peaceful change? What else could we do except to surrender, to resign ourselves to slavery, and we couldn't do that.
During the years that Idi Amin ruled Uganda, becoming a byword for almost comic vanity and far from comic brutality, Museveni was one of a group of political leaders fighting for Amin's overthrow from exile.
You understand what I say?
Their chance came when Tanzania invaded Uganda in 1979. The Tanzanians defeated Amin's army, and the Ugandans celebrated the end of one of Africa's most brutal regimes. Along with the soldiers came the exiled politicians. Museveni himself held the post of Minister of Defence under the two brief regimes that immediately followed the Tanzanian invasion. He seemed very much part of the new Ugandan political establishment. The elections in 1980 changed all that. This man, Milton Obote, wanted to win back the post of president. He'd run Uganda in the pre-Amin days. And Museveni himself was once a member of his Ugandan People's Congress Party. But during the years of exile, Museveni and Obote had become bitter rivals. And Museveni formed his own political party and stood against Obote. The elections came, and Obote swept the board. But there were widespread allegations that the ballot was rigged, and Commonwealth observers sent to monitor it left before the votes were counted. Crying foul, Museveni left for the bush. Early morning, and a patrol from Museveni's army moves out to prepare an ambush. They're constantly trying to catch military convoys to replenish their weapon and ammunition supplies. This time they settle themselves just off the main road from Kampala. Some wait in the grass, while 20 yards ahead, comrades open fire as soldiers are spotted unexpectedly. Smoke from a grenade rises. Two government soldiers have stumbled into the ambush by accident, travelling along a track off the main road. The Ugandan government has always said that much of the evidence of fighting is fabricated. There's nothing fake about this man's fresh blood. Papers show that one of the soldiers had been given a day's leave to visit his sick child. The officer in charge explains that the two men had arrived while they were waiting for the convoy. He said they had to be killed because they might otherwise alert the army to the rebels' presence. Not quite the booty they'd hoped for, but the bodies are stripped of everything that might be useful before the patrol moves on. Shortage of supplies hampers the rebels more than any other single factor. They once had some from Libya, but those dried up 2 years ago. Colonel Gaddafi's conditions were too demanding. Now everything is plundered from the government forces. Lack of ammunition and proximity to the enemy means in training they simulate the sound of gunfire. A far cry from the sort of training the officer in charge will have gone through. He was at the Mons military training school in Britain. Just as rigorous as the military training is the troops' political education. A crash course in political science, the movement espouses an old-fashioned mixed economy, and a thorough grounding in modern Ugandan history, or at least the rebel leadership's version of what's happened since independence and what part Obote has played.
Because Obote did not value self-determination. He valued the education of the people of the North. And in fact, it did not mean the people of the North, it meant himself.
The National Resistance Movement is a nationalist organization. It is a nationalist in the sense that it is fighting for the aims of the whole country and not for aims of a section of the country. Secondly, the National Resistance Movement is a democratic movement. is a movement which is fighting for democracy.
Like this 14-year-old, many have joined the movement because they say they or their families have been ill-treated by the government troops. Speaking through an interpreter, the child said he'd seen his mother hacked to pieces with a machete by government soldiers. And there are a number of army deserters who claim to have been sickened by what they were ordered to do while they were serving in the army.
We went on operation in Arua district, whereby an operation commander ordered the soldiers, the troops, to kill, smash everything they find in the operation area.
Government troops in training. The authorities point out that they've been faced with the problem of rebuilding a disciplined and controllable army in the wake of the chaos left by Amin's fall. First, they had the help of a Commonwealth team, and there's still a small contingent of British troops training them now. But the people of the Luwero Triangle say it isn't working. The rebels showed these skeletons as evidence of what the government forces have been doing. They said a village of civilians friendly to the rebels had been wiped out. The government claims that the atrocities are being committed by the rebels themselves, and the bones might just as well belong to their victims. And they dismiss as fabrications stories like those told by this priest. Himself bearing the scars of an attack, he said that in one incident troops had taken a 6-month child from its mother and pounded it to death with a pestle and mortar used for breaking up groundnuts.
Groundnuts, then started pounding.
The fighting has left one of Uganda's richest regions almost completely depopulated. Once prosperous villages now lie deserted. This is prime country for growing coffee, Uganda's most important export. Now the beans hang unharvested on the trees, left for the rebels to pick at will. The few civilians that remain in the area live in fear, hidden deep in the bush. They survive off what little they can cull from this once heavily cultivated land. There has been a let-up in the killing in the last few months. The rebels say that's because there are so few left to cultivated land. There has been a let-up in the killing in the last few months. The rebels say that's because there are so few left to kill. And they claim conditions now compare badly even to the Amin days.
They are very much worse than they were under Amin. Because under Amin, first of all, Idi Amin was not killing people outside the intellectual class. He used to kill only the elite, elements from the elite who were threatening his position. Or sometimes over rivalry, over business, things like that. But he never touched the peasantry. But Obote is killing everybody.
With talk like that, there seems little hope that the rebels will come in from their life in the bush. Every 10 days or so, they dismantle their mobile headquarters, pack up the guns they've captured from the government, and move on. The houses they've constructed are destroyed, so that the camp can't be used by the government forces. A new set will have to be built at the next stopping point. Because of the rebels' mobility and the continuing problems of the Ugandan army, there seems little hope of the government finding a military solution. As far as a political solution is concerned, President Obote has said he won't negotiate with the rebels, but he will hold elections this year. Museveni dismisses that as a sham. He and his men will press on with the fight.